Hey my loves, you can call me Lashe, and today we'll be cutting and sewing this cleanly finished, gorgeous recreation of Ife Aso Anyi by Ugo Monye. So make sure you watch till the very end and check out the timestamps, as I'm sure you'll learn one or two things before the end of this video. Now don't forget to leave a like, drop your questions in the comment section and subscribe to my channel. Let's move. This is the gorgeous material we're going to be making use of. It's called senator material or cashmere, depending on where you're getting your material from. So to start with, you want to make sure that you fold your material into four. And to determine the width of material you need to fold, you have to calculate the largest or the widest part of your measurement. For this particular piece, the widest part of our measurement would be the sleeves, the shoulder and the sleeves, and that is because this top would not be having any joining whatsoever at the shoulder. So we'll not be joining the sleeves to the bodies for this top. So it's going to be this kimono effect kind of vibe. To start with, you want to make sure you rule out a starting line because that's where we're going to be taking all of our lengthwise measurements from. For this client, our shoulder measurement is 14 inches, which divided by 2 is 7 inches. So go ahead and mark out that 7 inches here on the shoulder line. And for our sleeves, because I mentioned it's going to be a kimono effect or a kimono kind of sleeves, so we're going to be adding extra 7 inches for the sleeves. You can decide to increase or reduce this depending on the look you're going for. So 7 inches for the sleeves, and then I will be adding about 3 inches for the allowance, because I'm thinking I want it to have, the folding where the allowance is significant as opposed to those ones with half an inch or so. So from that 7 inches, you go ahead and add extra 3 inches allowance. For the neck, I'll be using the typical measurement of 3 by 3. So mark that out, but make sure not to cut it out because we're cutting the front and back piece together. From the shoulder, you want to make sure you drop 1 inch for the shoulder slope and connect that slope to your neckline with your straight ruler. Now we can move to our lengthwise measurement, starting from the shoulder to bust point or nipple. This client's shoulder to bust measurement is 10 inches, but I like adding half inch to my lengthwise measurement. So by the time I'm holding the shoulder with half an inch, it doesn't affect the lengthwise measurement. Shoulder to under bust is 13 inches, so I'll make that 13.5 inches. Shoulder to waist is 19 inches, I'll make that 19.5 inches. Shoulder to hip is 26 inches, so that'll be 26.5 inches. Looking at the pictures that I showed at the beginning of this video, you can see that the top length goes way past the hip length. So you can then determine how many inches past the hip line you want your top to sit at. For this client, I'll be making use of the entire length of this fabric, and that is about 35.5 inches, which obviously is inclusive of the hemline allowance. I like duplicating my measurements on the other side just so it's easy to roll out. So now that we have our lengthwise measurement, the next thing is to take our circumference measurement. But before that, let's go ahead and take the round sleeve measurement. For this client, our round sleeve measurement is 17 inches, which is 8.5 inches. So go ahead and mark that out, not forgetting to add 0.5 inches of sewing allowance. So once you have that out, let's go ahead and take our circumference measurement. Our bust is 39 inches, but I'll just round that up to 40 inches. And that is because this top is a very free top. It doesn't need to be form-fitting to your body or to your client's body. So 40 inches divided by 4 is 10 inches. And I'll make sure to add 1 inch ease allowance because, like I mentioned, it's a very free top. After your 1 inch ease allowance, you add 1 inch for the sewing allowance. Our under bust measurement is 32 inches, and 32 inches divided by 4 is 8 inches. So go ahead and mark your under bust measurement out, not forgetting to add 1 inch of ease allowance and 1 inch of sewing allowance. The same measurement for our waist, 32 inches divided by 4 is 8, so 8 inches, your 1 inch ease allowance and your 1 inch sewing allowance. Our hip is 40 inches, so that divided by 4 is 10 inches, but instead of adding 1 inch of ease allowance, I'll be adding about 3 inches of ease allowance at the hip area, and that is because the hip area of this cloth is a bit exaggerated in the sense that you want it to also accommodate your ashoke baggy pants. So you don't want a situation where the hip area is form-fitting and that shrinks up the shokoto. And that shrinks up your ashoke trouser. You don't want that. So you can add about 3 or 4 inches of ease allowance and add your 1 inch sewing allowance. So to connect this point to this point, we can just make use of our ruler. There's no need for a definite measurement. Another thing I want you to notice, even though we marked out the circumference of our waist measurement, we're not going to really use it, and that is because the only part where this top is a bit form-fitting is at the under bust. Anything below that has to be a bit free. So let's go ahead and connect all these points with our ruler. You know, as women, we don't have any sharp pointy parts in our bodies, so you want to make sure you round out any right angles, any sharp angles you have on your marked outlines, okay? And especially for this armhole area, you know I mentioned that it's going to be very similar to a kimono with no joining at the shoulders. So you want to make sure that you connect your round sleeve to your bodies in such a way that you have no sharp corners or sharp points here. Now that we've rounded out our corners, the next thing is to mark out the measurement of the neck area for the back, because you know this 3x3 is for the front and you don't want a situation where you're cutting out the same 3x3 for the back as well. So for the back, we're going to mark out 1 inch. So by the time we're turning it with the lining, it's going to round up to about 1.5 inches. And don't forget that we're going to have slits at the lower part of our top. So you want to make sure to mark that out if you're going to forget. For this client, I'll be making use of 7 inches for a slit line or a slit level. You can decide to go higher or lower depending on your choice. So now that we're done outlining and marking out the necessary measurements, the next thing is to cut out this main fabric and use this to cut out your lining as well. Because yes, we're going to be lining this top. And don't forget to be adding a zip to one part of the shoulder just so it is easy to get in and out for you or your client, okay? Another thing you can do to make things very easy for you is to notch all the key points like the underbust and the hip, so it's easy for you when you are joining. Now that we're done cutting out the main fabric, the next thing is to cut it out on our lining. Be very careful when you come to the neck area. You don't want to cut out the wrong measurement on the neck because you know the front and back are not the same measurement, okay? Another important thing I want to do, which I like doing when it comes to turning my main fabric with the lining, is to reduce the length of this lining, especially at the sleeves and at the hemline for this particular top. And that is because I want a situation where the lining will pull in the main fabric. So what we'll have is a situation where the hem of the main fabric goes in like this and then the lining continues from here. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but don't worry, we're going to have a visual representation by the time I'm done sewing. So what I like to do is determine the hemline, the hem allowance for both the sleeve and the hemline of the top. So once you determine that, you can then go ahead and cut out the excess of the lining. I will go ahead and cut out 2 inches from the length of the sleeves. For the lining alone, please make note of that or take note of that so you don't go and cut your main fabric. I will just cut out 2 inches from the lining, and I'm cutting out only 2 inches first, even though I added about 3 to 4 inches of sewing allowance at the sleeve. The reason I'm cutting 2 inches first is because you can always reduce the length, but you can never add on, at least when it comes to designs like this. So I try as much as possible not to overcut. So what will happen is by the time I'm turning this main fabric with the lining at the sleeve, I'm going to have something of sorts. It just gives it a cleaner finish and it makes sure that the lining doesn't poke out at the sleeves when you're done sewing. So I'll repeat the same thing for the hemline like I mentioned. So for the lining, I want to take in about 1.5 inches. I'll just go ahead and mark that out and cut it out. Make sure to cut out the front part of your neck area as well, because you know it's not the same as the back. So once you're done with that, it's time to sew. The first thing you want to do is to fix your zip. So I'm going to be using this invisible zip. That way it's not as obvious because it's going to be on the shoulder. Now that we've determined that, the next thing you want to do is to determine the length of your zip. Obviously, this is a very short zip, so you're going to determine the length and then you sew a straight stitch from that point to the end of your shoulder or to the end of your sleeve. Do you understand? So once you're done with that, you go ahead and fix your invisible zip before we then go ahead and turn the main fabric with the lining. So I'm going to go fix the zip off camera and I'll be right back. And just to show you what I mean, I've gone ahead to sew down this part and I've ironed down the zip allowance. So this is where I'm going to be inserting my zip. Now I'm done inserting the zip, and the next thing is to turn both front and back of my main fabric with the lining. So I'll take this to my sewing machine and turn the neckline with this lining, after which I can then join the second part of the shoulder. And you can see how clean the shoulder is looking, almost as if there's no zip there. That's the beauty of using invisible zip. And you have to make sure you use the appropriate method to fix your zip. Let me know if you need a video of how I fixed my invisible zip. Once you're done fixing the zip, the next thing you want to do is to turn the main fabric with your lining. So I've gone ahead to do that on both sides of the sleeves, and the next thing is to join the sides. You can see how the inside of this top is also looking very neat. That is always the goal. But before you join the sides, what you want to do is take your main fabric and your lining at the hemline, you turn them right sides facing each other, and with a 0.5 inches sewing allowance, run a straight stitch joining both together. That way you have an invisible or a clean finishing. Once you're done with that, you can then go ahead to join the sides of your top. So I've decided against turning the main fabric with the lining the invisible way. And the reason for that is I just came to a realization that this client is not in Nigeria. This clothes is going to the UK. And I don't want a situation where my clients do not have the luxury of either coming back to me for free fittings or the luxury of taking it to another seamstress to be able to take in or take out their outfits. So because of that, I've decided to overlock the sides instead, and I'll just run a straight stitch up until the point of the slits. So if you want to go the invisible way, that is good, that is great, because at the end of the day, what you have is a very, very neat finishing on the inside, which is what I always strive for. And if you've been following me so far on this journey, you would know. So now that that has been established, what I'll do is flip this inside out, making sure the main fabric is facing each other right side. And I will go ahead and run a straight stitch at the sides. I'll run a straight stitch from this sleeve area down to the level where I want my slit to stop. And for my slit length, I'll be making use of 5.5 inches. So you can go ahead and mark that out just so you don't mistakenly sew more than that on both sides. So what I'll do now is just take this to my sewing machine, and with a 1 inch sewing allowance or 0.5 inches sewing allowance, you sew a straight line all the way to the point where you want your slit to start from. So repeat that for both sides. So once you're done joining the inner sides, the last thing you want to do is use your hemming gum to glue this slit area down so you don't have a flapping slit like this. Once you're done ironing the hemming glue down, this is what you have, a very clean finish. Your slits won't be flapping. So go ahead and repeat this on the other side. Now let's move to the overlay so we can wrap up this Ife Aso Anyi recreation by Ugo Monye. Okay, for the overlay, we're going to quickly run through this as it's not a difficult thing to achieve. The only part that can be a little bit tricky for some people is the bishop collar, and I'll be sure to make it as detailed as possible when we get to that part. So what I'll just do is to mark out the lengthwise measurements and the shoulder, which is the only circumference measurement we're going to be using for this overlay. So to start with, I'm using the lining just so I'm on a safe side, and as opposed to drafting this out on a pattern paper, let me cut it out on the lining, and if there's any adjustments or amendments I need to make to the measurement, I can easily do that as opposed to cutting it on the main fabric and possibly damaging it. So on your lining, make sure to fold it into 4 as I've done right here. This will be our starting line, which will also serve as our shoulder. For the length of the overlay, I'm making use of 43 inches for my client's length, and I'm adding 2 inches for the hem allowance. You can decide to increase or decrease this measurement based on your preference. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is after folding or while folding your lining into 4, you want to make sure that you're using your shoulder as the circumference guide, so you know exactly how much to fold. This client's shoulder is 14 inches, which divided by 2 is 7 inches. But I'm going to be adding 2 inches to that 7 inch. I lost footage, guys, apologies. So what I've done so far is explain how you fold your main fabric or your lining that you're currently cutting on into 4. The major measurements we're going to be needing is the only circumference measurements we're making use of for this overlay, and that is the shoulder measurement. For this client, our shoulder is 14 inches, so that divided by 2 is 7 inches. Don't forget that this is currently on fold, so we have both the front and the back that we're cutting at the same time. So now that I have my 7 inches of measurement, I'm going to add 2 inches to that measurement because this overlay by Ugo Monye, it slightly hangs over the shoulders. So I want to recreate that by adding 2 inches to the original 7 inches of my client's shoulder. Once you have that 2 inches marked out, which will then give me 9 inches. Once you have that 9 inches marked out, all you need to do is drop your shoulder by 1 inch. And for the neckline, I'm using 3 by 2 inches. So 3 inches here and 2 inches for the front part, 3 inches here and 1 inch for the back part. So don't make the mistake of cutting both your front and back with this 3 by 2 inches. Okay, so now that I've done that, you connect it to your shoulder slope. You rule from your shoulder slope a straight line all the way to your hemline. And once you're done with that, all that is left is to cut it out and recut this same thing on your main fabric. Another thing I want to quickly do right now is to notch my underbust or my client's underbust. And the reason I'm going to notch that underbust is because if you look at that Ugo Monye collection, you would see that there's a strap, a tiny strap of about 1 inch that is connecting the front to the back of the overlay. So I want to put that connecting strap at my client's underbust, just so there's a bit of definition right there. So just notch this so that when you're sewing, you know exactly where to place that connecting strap. Don't forget to cut the neck area of your front piece. Now that we're done with this, the only thing that I'm going to do is to split my front piece into 2. And the reason I'm going to split it is because there is a zip at the front part. So we'll need to split it up so that we can join this side back and add our zip to the upper part of the front piece. Keep in mind that I currently have more than enough sewing allowance for this overlay because I added extra 2 inches to my original 7 inches. So go ahead and cut this out again on your main fabric. This is the main fabric I'm going to be using. I've gone ahead to pin this lining onto the main fabric, and the only thing that is left is to cut it all around. Making use of an invisible zip, go ahead and stitch down 0.5 inches all the way down, and then you can insert your invisible zip before we do the turnings of the neckline and the shoulder and the sides. But before that, I'm going to cut out the strap that I mentioned earlier, the connecting strap from the front to the back. So this is the connecting strap, and these are the measurements: 13 inches lengthwise and 2.5 inches widthwise. Turn it right sides facing each other and sew a straight line of about 0.5 inches all the way through. Repeat the same thing for the second side. Don't bother closing up these ends because we're going to be feeding these ends in between the main fabric and the lining. Before I add my zip, I'll make sure to iron stay to both the front and back pieces of this overlay. So I'll just add the stay off camera and make sure to fix the zip off camera as well. I'm done turning the main fabric with the lining, and this is how it's looking on the inside. This is what I was trying to explain earlier with making sure my lining is a bit shorter than the main fabric, so that when I turn it, the main fabric will be at the edges of my outfit as opposed to the lining being at the edge like this, which can most times bleed into the front of your fabric. So I've already added the connecting strap as well, and I'm gonna add the invisible zip. I intentionally applied this zip like this because that is how it is done on Ugo Monye's collection. Now that I'm done turning the main fabric with the lining, attaching the connecting straps and fixing the zip, the only thing that is left is to add the collar, and I'm going to be making use of a bishop's collar. So let's go ahead and draft it, cut it, sew it and attach it to this overlay. To start with, for your bishop's collar, you want to make sure you measure out the appropriate measurement, and what we'll be needing for our bishop's collar measurement is the round neck measurement, but in the straight form, and this is what I mean. From this zip teeth, you place your tape rule and you measure around, making sure not to pull on the fabric, but making sure it's firm enough that you can get an accurate measurement. So what we have here is 18.25. You want to make sure you measure right back to this zip teeth. To get our bishop's collar, let's start by drafting it on our pattern paper. So what you want to do is take a piece of paper and fold it into two like so. You can just get about 3 inches or so. Keeping the measurement we took earlier around the neck of our overlay in mind, it was 18.3 inches. 18.3 divided by 2 will give you about 9.2 inches. So that 9.2 inches is what you place on your pattern paper and mark out. The next thing we want to do is to get the height of our bishop's collar, and to do that you have to divide this measurement you currently have into 2. So for the length of your bishop's collar, go ahead and determine how tall you want it to be. For this client, I'll be making use of 1 inch. So our bishop's collar is going to be about 1 inch tall. Mark that out on the center point. This is our center point. Connect with a straight line. For this other part, instead of marking out the normal 1 inch here, we're going to mark out about 1.2 or 1.3 inches, and that is just so that by the time this bishop's collar is coming to sit on our neck area, it's going to rest perfectly without folding up in an awkward form. Mark about 1.2 inches at this point. So from this 1.2 inches, all you have to do is to connect this point to this point with a curve. So now that you have this, you want to make sure you continue this 1 inch measurement at this point as well. So you go ahead and mark out 1 inch here, here and here. Go ahead and connect all these points together. To get the curve that is normally on bishop's collar, all you have to do is to connect this point to this point with a curve. Now that we have that marked out, all you have to do is to cut out all this excess. And this is basically it. You can see it's already giving the shape of a bishop's collar. So by the time you attach this to your neckline, you should have something like this. All that is left is to cut this out on your main fabric and also your stay. But if you have a collar stay, that is the best option to use. I currently don't have that, so I'm going to be using an stay, but I'll make sure to double it. Once you're done ironing your stay onto your main fabric on the wrong side, what you want to do is to trim out this part, leaving a bit of sewing allowance, about 0.2 inches of sewing allowance all around. The next thing you want to do is to sew this sewing allowance onto the stay all around. But because we're using stay as opposed to collar stay, it's not easy for me to just iron directly onto this stay. So what I'm going to use as a substitute is this hemming gum. So I'll just place this hemming gum all around so I can easily iron my extra sewing allowance onto the hemming gum before going to my sewing machine and sewing it down with a straight stitch. So I'm going ahead to run a straight stitch from this point all the way across to this point. So the next thing is just to fold it into 2 like so, and then you take it back to your sewing machine again and you run a straight stitch from this point, from here all the way across like so, and back to this point, and you back stitch. So I've gone ahead to run a straight stitch all around like this, and the next thing is just to trim out all this excess sewing allowance that we have here. Once you're done trimming it out, turn it to the right sides. Take this to your ironing board and give this a very good press so that this relaxes perfectly. Those who say sewing is 10% of actual sewing, 40% pinning, and 50% ironing are not wrong, because look how neat this is now looking, just with a very good press. Once you're done ironing, the next thing you want to do is cut out the excess, leaving just enough sewing allowance that we're going to use to attach this bishop collar to our main fabric or to our overlay. It's time to bring our overlay back now that we're done with the bishop collar, and the only thing left is to attach this to our overlay. The first thing you want to do is to get your midpoint at the back. So I already have that notched here, and you repeat the same thing for the bishop's collar. Notch the center point at the back. Now that we've notched our bishop's collar as well, all that is left is just to take this bishop collar and place this part with the extra sewing allowance on your overlay, just like this. So it's like right sides facing right sides, do you understand? And then you take it to your sewing machine and sew all the way across like this, from this point all the way to this point. I'll take this to my sewing machine and do that off camera. I've gone ahead to stitch it all round, making sure to capture the lining as well. The only thing that is left now is to turn it like so and use your sewing machine to sew a straight line all across. It is advisable to stitch it down from this point so that you can capture both this and this, while making sure that the line is as straight as possible and as close to the seam line as possible. And for this lining, all you have to do is to take your needle and thread and you stitch an invisible stitching on this part by the time you are done adding your bishop's collar. So I'll go do that off camera and show you the final look. And here is the final look, my loves. I am really impressed by the details of this creation. The trouser, the inner top, and the overlay. Everything is working perfectly together in producing this beauty you can currently see on your screen. If you're interested in learning how I cut and sew the baggy trouser of this collection, click on the floating card above or check the description box. I'll be sure to link it below. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. You guys are the real stars. If you've watched till this point, make sure to drop a star emoji in the comment section. I would like to personally thank you. Feel free to drop any questions or design requests you would like me to recreate next. Please, my loves, give this video a thumbs up to support this channel. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to turn on your post notification so you get notified immediately after I post. Until the next video, bye!